Hi, my name is Margaret Sharp. This is my Com 350 pitch and presentation on sexuality in sports. It's called Why Women Athletes Are Either Too Feminine or Lesbian. So the intersections include sexuality, athletics, society. Sexuality is, your gender, femininity, masculinity, sexualization, LGBTQ plus community, anything surrounding those. A big piece of athletics is this idea of women versus men. So women and men cannot compete together, and women and men's sports are framed very differently in media and society. Collegiate athletes, we have the NCAA, which is making lots of changes within their bylaws, and for professional athletes, they're always under society and media scrutiny. So I have a personal connection to this. I grew up playing sports. I'm still involved in sports to this day. I work in the athletics department. I do things that are always going to be surrounded by sports, and I want to continue to pursue a career in that, and I want to make it a welcoming space because I think that sports are a great thing. But I've also seen the sexualization, and I've been told no because I was a girl, and sports brought me that first realization that I was a woman and they were male, and we could not be in the same room because of what society said. So this page seems like a lot, but it's just talking about the research that I did. These are four main books and ideas that I collected. And so we have current controversies in sports media and society. She talks about the sexualization and how this has caused girls to drop out of sports. And then another piece that she talked about is education. So education is really big. And there is a lack of education on LGBTQ plus athletes, on women and men athletes. And this is all something that has caused the stigma and problems, even in the locker room. Dr. Keon contributed to the bottom two, and they're both talking about how media is framing this idea of men versus women in a very interesting way. So on the right, you see he talks about how male writers are more likely to enforce gender stereotypes. And they go in and they talk about the male athletes, but they don't talk about the women athletes, and when they do, it's in a controversial way. And when female writers talk about it, they talk about the athletes and their prowess, their athletic prowess, and that's simply because they have experienced it themselves. And then the last aspect on the top right, Unhealthy Climate by Luke Cyphers and Kate Fagan. It talks about how the recruiting process has caused harm to some of these coaches because people like Kathy Marp, as you see in the second quote, she coached at San Diego for a while and she stayed closeted throughout that whole time because she was scared to turn recruits away because she was deemed unfamily. And this idea that a woman who doesn't have a significant other or family or anything like that, they must not have a family atmosphere in their team, and that continues on, even into like the WNBA and such. So the first person I talked to was Ann Osborne. She's a professor here at Syracuse. She's authored plenty of books on gender, sexuality, and their place in sports. So she talked a lot about, the start of this all. So that we've always had this idea of femininity versus masculinity and where it fits in. The third quote says there was this fear in the early days that playing sports could turn someone into a man, and this idea has evolved, and we can see it because if they're playing a masculine sport, they must be gay, they must like women. If they're playing a feminine sport, they have to be feminine. There's no way they're anything else. This translates to the male side. So with the NFL, it's a hyper masculine sport, and when a gay man or anyone that is a bit more feminine walks in, it's a negative narrative that they spin, and then our media does pick it up and they continue with it. I also talked to Kay Racine, who is a previous student athlete. She's now a master's student here. She talked about how at first you don't see the big change in how men and women are treated in the media and by athletics departments, but then you do. You see it, and you don't have the same gear. You don't have the same recognition when records are broken. But overall, she said that it did get to her a little bit, but now that she's in this opposite role of as the media, that she wants to spin the narrative a little bit. But that's hard because broadcasting in media is a white man's game. It always has and it always will be if we continue in the society that we are in. To go along with that, there's no education, there's no coaching that refers to women athletes, LGBTQ plus athletes. And the media, as she says, the media tends to steer away from this LGBTQ plus community, from the idea of women athletes, and they just want you to focus on the game. But her last quote was probably one of the most impactful, and she said, "You can't tell someone's story if you only tell half the story." So then the last person I talked to, her name's Sophia Macaluso. She's a current electrical engineering student and is a part of the club lacrosse scene here. So on a different level, she did high school athletics and she's now on the club in the club scene, but she's always feeling to defend herself. So if she says, "Oh, I play women's lacrosse," she's immediately thinking of a comeback, because people can't just accept that she plays women's lacrosse. They have to bring up that it's not the same as men's lacrosse. They have to bring up it's not as good as men's lacrosse. And she did cheer for a while, that people weren't willing to recognize the work that they did as a cheer team unless it was with the football team. And this even stems into her engineering classes and her male dominated field, because, as she said, there's always an extra voice in the room. So, how can we change society's standards of athletes? The first step is minding your business. If a athlete doesn't want to come out, they don't need to come out. That's not our duty as a society to do. But when they do want to come out, we celebrate them. That's a big thing, is we should celebrate and not negate them. Um, Reading information and writing information and facts and not gossip are very different things. So if you know for sure, then all for it. But if you don't know, it's just gossip. And that's a big problem with our society. And then understanding that athletes are also people, and framing your words around the sports and gender, making sure that you're aware of and how you're framing them. And then the last piece is understanding that when you're talking about someone's home life, it's okay to talk about diversity. So here are a few sources that you can look at. We have places like Athlete Ally, the Sport Journal, Amazon, which has the current controversies in sports media and society. Thank you so much.